Alright, what's going on, guys? Today we're going to be taking a look at the first ever Challenger decks released in Magic the Gathering. That's right, the age of the Challenger deck is upon us. If you're watching this video, perhaps you're thinking about buying a Challenger deck to compete at your local gaming store's F&M tournament, but you just don't know which deck is for you. Well, fear not. In this video, I'll briefly go over how each deck works so you can buy the one that fits your playstyle. The 4 Challenger decks feature all 5 colors, and there's a deck for each major archetype, that being aggro, mid-range, and control. So you can find something that's perfect for you, and I will help you find it. I'm not going to go over the entire deck list, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of how the deck works, just so you can get an idea of which one might fit your playstyle. So, sound good? Great, let's get started. First, we'll take a look at Counter Surge. This is a green-black mid-range deck that looks to win the game with large, overpowering creatures. It starts off with Winding Constrictor, a 2-mana 2/3 creature that says when you put a counter on a creature, you get an additional one of those counters, as well as giving yourself more counters as well. But basically the deck wants to put a lot of +1/+1 counters on creatures while it has the snake in play. So a couple cards that do that are things like Rishkar, Pima Renegade, and Verdurous Gearhulk, both of which spread out a bunch of +1/+1 counters, which in turn can be doubled by Winding Constrictor. So like, imagine a turn 3 Rishkar with a Winding Constrictor. I mean, it's pretty crazy, right? Imagine playing a Winding Constrictor on turn 2, turn 3 you play Rishkar, you put +1/+1 counters on both of the creatures, and suddenly the snake's a 4/5 and Rishkar's a 4/4 on turn 3, and then Verdurous Gearhulk can just come in on turn 5, or earlier with Rishkar, because you can tap for mana, and then, just spread out a bunch of +1/+1 counters, which in turn are doubled, and things just get massive really quick. That's the general idea of the deck, though it has plenty more going for it. It has things like Walking Ballista to wipe out your opponent's board, Scrap Heap Scroungers, which are very difficult to kill, and Long Tusk Cubs, which get double counters when you activate it thanks to Winding Constrictor, so that can get out of control pretty fast. There are also plenty of ways to deal with your opponent's creatures, in the form of Walk the Plank, Fatal Push, and Hour of Glory, so plenty of ways to keep your opponent's blockers off the board. So yeah, that's Counter Surge. The person who plays Counter Surge is going to be creating very large creatures, clearing away blockers, and then swinging for some pretty big damage. So if that's your thing, then this is the deck for you. Moving on, we'll take a look at Hazoret Aggro. This is a mono red aggro deck. The deck is designed to flood the board very quickly with very aggressive creatures, and then back them up with a painful selection of burn spells. So it plays cards like Soulscar Mage, Bowmat Courier, Fanatical Firebrand. These allow you to just flood the board with tons of creatures very fast. They're swinging immediately a lot of times. And then as soon as your opponent starts playing creatures, you just burn them away with things like Shock, Lightning Strike, Abrade. Basically red deck wins, right? It's a classic archetype in Magic the Gathering. Now the problem with red deck wins and most aggro decks is that they start to run out of gas after a few turns, right? They have trouble getting through blockers once the opponent starts stabilizing. Well, no worries here. This deck has a couple ways around that, such as with On-Crop Crasher and Glorybringer. So On-Crop Crasher is a 3-mana 3-power with haste, and when it attacks you can exert it to keep a blocker from doing its job. Not only will your opponent not be expecting the extra 3 damage, but having their last blocker removed could be disastrous for them, and a winning play for you. Glorybringer does the exact same thing, just on a larger scale, dealing 4 damage to a creature, potentially killing it, and then swinging in for 4 damage in the air. That can turn a game in your favor easily enough, or simply end it immediately. Alternatively, you could just play Hazoret herself, a 4-mana 5-power creature with haste and indestructible. She's a powerhouse that your opponent probably isn't going to enjoy seeing. Sure, she can't attack if you have too many cards in her hand, but this deck empties its hand super fast, so it usually won't be a problem. Oh yeah, and the deck comes with Chandra, Torch of Defiance. Did I mention that? Well, yeah, there's that. Chandra, Torch of Defiance in the deck. So, do you like harassing your opponent in the early game, threatening to drain their life total within the first few turns of drawing your opening hands? Well, then maybe Hazoret Aggro is the deck for you. Next up, we'll take a look at Second Sun Control. This is a blue-white control deck with an insta-win condition. It does what most blue-white control decks do: counter spells, wipe the board, gain some life, just try to push the game as late as possible until you can win the game out of nowhere. Yep, that's a blue-white control, alright. So it starts with things like Censor and Supreme Will to counter spells, because your opponent can't win if they can't play anything, am I right? I mean, I'm sure you had a lot of fun building that deck of yours, but too bad you can't cast anything. If they do manage to resolve a creature or two, no problem. Things like Cast Out, Farm to Market, and Ether Meltdown can deal with individual creatures. These will surely stop your opponent from attacking and allow you to keep pushing the game later and later, as you typically want in this type of deck. So as soon as your opponent resolves a creature, and they're all proud of themselves because they finally got a creature in against the blue control deck, Cast Out. Yep, enjoy that. Or you can torture them, play Ether Meltdown, and then they have to stare at it. It's still in play. They just have to stare at their useless little creature. How adorable. And then, sometimes things do get a little bit out of hand. It happens from time to time. Well, you can always hit the reset button with things like Fumigate and Settle the Wreckage. Yep, just hit the red button, clear the board, and all is well. Fumigate is extra spicy, actually, because you get to gain a bunch of life when you cast it. So not only do you wipe the board, but you put yourself at a more comfortable life total. So that's handy. So how do you win? Well, Approach of the Second Sun. When you cast it, you instantly win the game if you've cast another spell with the same name. But if you haven't, you get to gain 7 life. Yes, 7 life. And then you put that card on top of your library, second from the top, so that you can redraw it and win the game for sure. And, this is blue-white control, so there are plenty of ways to draw cards. So, yep, that's it. Play Approach of the Second Sun, gain 7 life, slip it into the top of your deck, and then cast it again to win the game. Yep, that's how Second Sun Control works, and there are some situations where you can just beat down with Kefnet too. Yeah, why not? It's not the main win condition, but hey, a 3 mana 5/5 flyer indestructible? Sure, why not? It's mostly meant for drawing cards, but at the same time, it's really powerful, so every once in a while, why not go a swinging? So, if making your opponent miserable by denying them the ability to play Magic, until you can push the game so late that you can insta-win with a 7 mana sorcery, if that's your thing, then Second Sun Control is the deck for you. And no one will think that you're a horrible person, I'm sure. And finally, the last deck and the first run of Magic the Gathering Challenger decks is Vehicle Rush. This deck is another aggro deck, however it focuses more on artifact synergies and beating down with undercosted vehicles. Things like Heart of Kiran, Ether Sphere Harvester, and Sky Sovereign console flagship. These vehicles are massive for their mana cost, and this deck looks for cheap, efficient ways to crew them up and start beating down quickly. For example, things like Toolcraft Exemplar, Veteran Motorist, and Dipala Pilot Exemplar. So Toolcraft Exemplar is pretty crazy. It costs 1 mana, and in this deck can easily be a 3/2 with a first strike during combat, so it can dish out damage quickly all by itself. It's also the perfect size to crew up a Heart of Kiran, so how convenient. The same is true for Veteran Motors, which not only scries for vehicles when it enters the battlefield, but it also makes them bigger when it crews things. And then Dipala pumps them up without even crewing them, as well as pumping up your dwarves. And all of your pilots are dwarves, so that's fantastic. And she even digs through your deck for dwarves and vehicles whenever she becomes tapped. She doesn't even have to attack to do that because she taps when she crews the vehicle. So yeah, pretty crazy. The deck does feature some ways to obviously control the board in the form of Lightning Strike and Unlicensed Disintegration. So that allows you to clear out some blockers and take out the final chunk of your opponent's health for the win. Unlicensed Disintegration is particularly awesome. Destroy any creature and also deal 3 damage to the opponent most of the time, pretty much all the time. So that's kind of fantastic. And who says you need vehicles anyway? You can actually end the game fairly quickly just by being an aggro deck. I mean, just look at, say, Toolcraft Exemplar followed by Scrap Heap Scrounger. That's 6 points of damage on the battlefield on turn 2. And then backing those up with, the burn spells as mentioned earlier, Lightning Strike and Unlicensed Disintegration. Sure, it uses the fancy vehicle mechanic, the new vehicle mechanic for Kaladesh, but you can always just stay low to the ground and beat down the old-fashioned way. So anyway, if you want to go fast and crew up some hefty pieces of machinery with some battle-hungry dwarves, well, Vehicle Rush might be the deck for you. And that's it, guys. Those are the 4 new Challenger decks. If you want the full deck list, I will leave a link to the original article in the description below, so feel free to check that out. But I think this gives you a rough idea of what the decks do, so you can buy the deck that suits your playstyle. So anyway, what do you guys think about these? Are these good for the game? Are these good for F&M? And which one's your favorite? If you're gonna buy one, which one is it? Which one are you looking at, guys? Which one's calling your name? Well, anyway, let me know what you think, and let me know what you think about the video. If you want to see more videos like this for any future Challenger deck releases, if you do find this useful, let me know. Hopefully this was a kind of simplified guide to the decks. But anyway, yeah, that's it, guys. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.